Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon everybody and welcome back to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and part 2 of the Weekend Warriors, the Spec Racer Fords. My name is Ron Mullins, alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall we have our old friend Samuli Kumo. And today we are running in the forest of Germany at the Nürburgring on the Grand Prix layout, to be a bit more precise. This track, it's a little bit hard to try and decipher what kind of race we have on our hands here today. This track is twisty and technical, but the straightaways here could also create some very tantalizing overtaking opportunities as well. So Charles, to pass things off to you, what kind of race do you expect here this afternoon?
I mean, you're pretty much on it, Ron. There's lots of straight lines that these spec racers are going to really love. You can keep those. You can get a good draft off the car in front and pick up a couple of tenths, and then of course you've got some very, very twisty bits as well. You know, Schumacher-esque hairpin, lots of 90-degree corners. And then that little tricky chicane at the end of the lap is going to make things a little challenging for the drivers. So looking forward to a really good race. This is not a place we usually come to visit, so it'll be interesting to see how these drivers get along.
Yeah, fingers crossed this is going to be a very good race, and to put on this good racing we have a very good sponsor this week, that being Bobby West, promoting his own social media pages, that being WestTech_esports_racing on Instagram. You can check that out. It's spelled WESTTEK_esports_racing. Check them out on Instagram to see Bobby West's adventures and Bobby West's perspective of these Weekend Warriors races. I was looking through his Instagram account and he had some pretty nice screenshots, including some screenshots of last week's Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race at Lime Rock, which featured a photo finish between himself and Jason Green for the win in that race. After 40 minutes of racing action, this series always has some close finishes. Long Beach, Lime Rock was no exception last time out, and here at the Nürburgring it's going to be no exception as well. So I think before we really get into the meat and potatoes of this race meeting, I think we should probably take a look at the championship points, and there you can see in Spec 1 we already have one round on the board, and it was last week's winner Jason Green leading it in the Spec 1 category, 108 points over on the board over Bobby West. In P number 2, Megan Overstreet, who sadly will not be joining us this week in P number 3. Atlas Pleva, the driver from the Czech Republic, is in 4th, and Claudio Gradini, the driver from Switzerland, is going to round out your top 5 in the Spec 1 category. And Christian Kabanka, I see right there, right off the back of a win in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors earlier on this afternoon. He's in 6th. Now moving over to Spec 2, it is tight in this category. Andrew Love leads it over Arnish Jurcevics in P2. Speaking of 2, it's only 2 points separating those two drivers in Spec 2. And meanwhile, our buddy Josh Wilkie is in 3rd, with Teresa right behind, only 1 point back of our buddy Josh Wilkie, and that's going to be Anthony Hay, the Brit, rounding out the top 5 in Spec 2. Incredibly close stuff in that class, and let's see how it is in Masters.
Yeah, Tom Gradwell is the Masters leader at 74. Jorg Monty only 4 points back in 2nd place. Chris Murakami, Antonio Race, and Stevie Ray round out your top 5. But as you said, early days. We're only 1 round in, so things are bound to change by the end of this race.
There's going to be a whole lot of movers and shakers when it comes time for the checkered flag coming out in this 40-minute race we have later on this afternoon. And here's Duda Castro. He's currently 2nd place in this qualifying session. Alice Pleva is leading it. He is our provisional pole sitter with a little over 5.5 minutes left to go in this qualifying session. That 2-minute 14.477 is a decent lap time. He has a pretty big margin between himself and Duda Castro, only about a 10.5 separating those two. However, the gap between Castro and Green is pretty expansive. We saw earlier on in the Formula 4 Weekend Warriors at Brands Hatch earlier on this afternoon, well, it's at the top 15, separated by a little over a second. Here at this track, which is much longer for the Spec Racer Fords, much longer lap times, we're seeing only the top 4 covered by a click over 1 second. So a little bit spread out here.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of shocking, actually, if you think about it. These normally we'll see the top 20, drivers or so separated by a second, and so this makes me wonder if maybe those guys used a really good strategy to maybe get a toe on their qualifying lap. And so we'll see. We've still got about 5 minutes left in qualifying, so we'll see if anybody else can employ that. See Jorg Monty getting a nice run off of Jason Perry there, heading down into that hairpin, along with Reese is just right behind them. So, both those guys are going to get the benefit of that draft up front. Perry's quick enough that he's not going to hold them up very much as they work their way through Schumacher S. So yeah, it's just a matter of getting that good run and getting some good draft help, and see if this tightens this top group up before it's all said and done.
These two running at the front of the Masters category in this qualifying session right now, right off the back of running at the front of the Formula Ford Masters category earlier on this afternoon, and they were in the same running order as well, with Monty in front of Reese. We'll see how things shake out. Tom Gradwell a little bit farther back in P12. He is the 3rd of the Masters driver, and right in front of him in the qualifying order as things stand currently is our top S2 qualifier, that being our buddy Josh Wilkie in that 223 car, currently 1.8 seconds back of our provisional pole sitter, that being Alice Pleva, who stopped in the pit box and probably very confident in that lap time. We'll just have to wait and see if he actually comes back out on the circuit to try and improve his lap time. But surprisingly, at this track, Slipstream playing a decent role, despite the fact that really, there's only 2 main flat-out blasts for these drivers to try and negotiate. We're on one right now before they head into the Vidal chicane, and then that start-finish straightaway. Besides that, you're pretty much turning the whole time, so it's a little bit shocking how big of a role that Slipstream is playing in this race.
Yeah, but these are, with the exception maybe the hairpin and the chicane, it's a pretty flowing track, so it doesn't surprise me too much. I guess turn 1 also. Doesn't surprise me too much they're able to get a good run down these straightaways, even though they're not very long. There's a lot of them, so it's good to see. And before we get too deep into this, as we're finish up qualifying, Stevie Ray sent us a little message. We want to give a shout out and some best wishes to Phil Berry, who runs in this series, underwent a little knee surgery, so he's obviously makes it a little difficult to drive a car. So we'll wish him the best. And hopefully he'll get nice and recovered. We'll be back with us very soon.
Yeah, Fingers crossed we see him at some point between now and the end of this season. Of course, we have a whole lot of time left to go with this season. This being round number 2 of 12, there's a whole lot of other races between now and the end of the season. So fingers crossed we'll see him back out on track. We wish him a very speedy recovery. Speaking of speedy, some of these drivers are on their final qualifying laps, trying to find any way in the book to improve their standing. Dudu Castro is currently on a qualifying lap. However, he's not tracking very quick. Actually, he's on his out lap, so we'll wait to see him start up his final flyer in just a few moments time. We had a big jumper, that being the sponsor of this race, Bobby West. He was running in, I think, 9th. It was just barely inside or just barely outside of the top 10, but he jumped up to 4th, currently a little under a second away from our provisional pole sitter Alice Pleva, who's still down in pit lane, so he must be feeling extremely confident in that lap time. Bobby West, meanwhile, still out there on the course. He's on his out lap along with Jason Green and Andallo in P number 5. So all these drivers looking to try and find any sort of window of opportunity to improve their qualifying time. I'm looking through our provisional grid as it stands at the moment. You see Jesus Rodriguez now splitting Monty and Reese in P number 7. We'll just have to see how things shake out, but is there anything that's surprising you about how this grid's looking out so far, Charles?
I mean, really, it's just the gaps, I think. Like I said, I think we're normally pretty top-heavy as far as our lap times, and it's usually much tighter. But, you know, still, like I said, another lap or two by most of these guys. So we'll see if that changes. But that's about it. It's not a I mean, there's a couple of technical sections. It's not really what I would say is a very difficult track, as we see race in the stadium section there, the Mercedes Arena section, I think is what it's called, with a little spin. That is one of the little tricky spots there, so you have to be very careful. And yeah, but so just I think the gaps is more than anything is not normally see much tighter grid. But, you know, for the most part, I think as we see the 555 car, Braz, almost gave out the wrong name. That's Brema. But yeah, that's all really as far as I've seen.
It's, I mean, fairly bog standard in terms of the running order. You've got a lot of the S1 drivers up towards the north end of the field. The Masters heavy hitters, Monty, Reese, Gradwell, Cathcart up towards the north end of the field. Our buddy Josh Wilkie, I won't say it's a shock that he's running in P11 right now, and I won't say anything about his previous luck in this series at risk of jinxing him. So pretty nice result from him if he can hold on to that spot. The checkered flag is out in this qualifying session, has been for the past 49 coming up to 50 seconds now. So it's been out for a little bit of time, so all these drivers are on their final laps. And Dudu Castro did improve a teeny tiny bit, however, he is still 0.078 of a second back of Alice Pleva, closing up that gap a decent amount. He is, however, just not close enough. We'll see if this man, Flavio Andallo, can actually improve on his qualifying time. Currently 1.016 back of Alice Pleva, rounding his way around the pretty inconsequential kink of turn number 13. Usually if you're running in a Formula 1 car or a GT or a prototype or something like that, that's a very tricky corner to try and get right. Here in these Spec Racer Fords, it's flat out. It's pretty much just a quick meandering kink with nothing too much to worry about. So we're going to see Andallo actually coming into the pits. So that's a shock. Yeah, you can see not tracking a very good lap time. So I guess he had no reason to complete that lap. So Andallo going to remain in 5th.
Yeah, it's he just decided, you know what, I will just come on in. I'm not improving on my lap. So and that same can be said for Reese as well. Looks like yellow sectors, meaning it's not his personal best, it's not the overall best. So, you know, looks like he will not make an improvement as well. So it looks like we're going to be pretty much where we are here as far as qualifying. I think pretty much everybody is done and off the track at this point, with the exception of Reese.
Yeah, Reese still running out there despite having that spin through the stadium section on that final lap. That was part of the reason it was in the 250 range. For everyone's sakes, we're probably not going to have lap times that slow, but that's I mean, you can understand why it was slow because of that spin. And even after that spin, you know, these Spec Racer Ford tires, you don't want to overheat them, and you also don't want to flat spot them. So I'm sure Antonio Reese was driving around, completing that lap after going for a spin, entering turn number 3, completing the other 13 corners, actually 14 corners. Oh, wait, no, I did do the math in my head initially. 13 corners left to complete that lap, just driving around on Spec Racer Ford tires, which pretty much resembled rectangles at that point. So I'm sure he was, especially going down the back straightaway, I gotta feel bad for him. The feedback in the wheel must have been immense. He was just driving around there saying, yeah, the car feels a little bit off right now, not sure what's going on. So that's not ideal for Antonio Reese, looking not to have a repeat of that in this race that we have coming up in just a few moments' time. He's still out there on track, though. I guess those rectangular Spec Racer Ford tires must not be too bad. And he's been ejected off the track, yoinked back to the pits, and abducted by a UFO. So now, with a shot of the Nürburgring in the back of a shot and that chicane, which is going to be a trouble spot, especially on lap number 1, we can take a look at the starting grid for this 40-minute Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race. It's going to be Alice Pleva, the driver from the Czech Republic, leading them to green. That 1 minute 14.477 was able to hold off any sort of challenge that anyone else had. The Brazilian of Duda Castro was the closest to him. He'll be joining him on the front row. Then Jason Green, who won last time out at Lime Rock, is going to be starting in second, alongside his adversary Bobby West in P number 4. That's going to be Flavio Andala, the Brazilian driver, in 5th. Urugmani, the top of the Masters, in P number 6. Jesus Rodriguez joining Antonio Reese on that 4th row, and then running at your top 10, it's going to be Daniel Wood and Jason Perry.
Yep, starting in P11, highest Spec 2 driver, Josh Wilkie. Tom Gradwell is in 12th. In 13th, we have Brad Cathcart, Paolo Brema in 14th, Josh Justice 15th, Jeff Jacobs in 16th, Andrew Love in 17th, Ignacio Terusio in 18th, Wilson Bruzarosco in 19th, Charlie Vaccaro in 20th, Gary Wolbolt 21st, Russ Telker 22nd, Darren Keene in 23rd, Wayne Buttermore in 24th. Christian Kabanka did not set a lap time, I don't think. It starts in 25th. Adam Bradshaw 26th, and Bob Kern rounds out your 27-car field.
And thankfully for us, we have a sure and pace lap, because if we had a full pace lap after getting through the starting grid while they're still waiting to get this formation lap underway, I feel like that would have been a we wouldn't have had a whole lot to talk about during that. We'd probably talk about the weather and the heat wave that's been hitting the U.S. as of late. That is coming onto the back straightaway right before the kink of turn number 13, about to head their way into the 14 and 15 Vidal chicane, and that is going to be a trouble spot. We've seen it flare up in real life, and many of the other broadcasts I've done here on Apex Racing TV at this very track. You've got killer curbs on the inside, on the inside of both parts of that chicane. That'll definitely trip up some of these drivers, even on this pace lap. You can see a little bit jumbled up, hoping that none of these drivers make any sort of contact or damage their race cars before we even grab the green. The curbs are going to be a huge factor in this race. I was seeing Jason Green before the start of it running the curb on entry to turn number 16. We'll see if he uses that strategy in this 40-minute race we have coming up. That Porsche pace car has gone down pit lane. The field is now in the hands of our pole sitter Alice Pleva in the number 46 car. We're waiting for that green flag to come out, which it has now. The drivers are now on their way. Very good start for Alice Pleva. Good start for Duda Castro as well. However, he's going to feel some pressure from Jason Green and Bobby West right behind. West trying to go around the outside. Jason Green tucked in right behind, hanging to turn number 1. A tricky corner regardless of what kind of race car you're doing it in, but all those drivers making it through turn number 1 clean so far. Now we're heading into the AMG arena to begin this race. All of them getting through smoothly. Jason Green moving his way back up into P3, with Bobby West having a slow run through turn number 2. Maybe picked up some sort of slowdown penalty, not sure what happened there. Meanwhile, our buddy Josh Wilkie, the top of the S2 drivers, has made his way up into the top 10. Very nicely played at the beginning of this race. Nice move on Daniel Wood to move his way up into the top 10. Well, some battling all throughout this field. I am very shocked we got through the first about a third of this lap clean.
Yeah, it was a good start by everybody. Normally, if you watch a GT race here, it's about 6 wide going into 1, which is great, but then it funnels down to about 2 wide going through the corner. These guys, I think the widest I saw was three deep. So they did a good job of just, taking their time, being patient, as we're seeing Christian Kabaka already up to 18th. He's got a great start, starting from the back. You just have to keep an eye out, see how far he is able to make it up the field. I think you talked about Bobby West, maybe, or was it Perry, that was a little slow coming out of 1 and 2. There is a little bit of an off-track / slowdown coming out of 1 if you're too far to the left, so that might have tripped him up.
Been what happened. Some of these drivers abusing the track limits, especially coming out of turn number 12 there. That was a Ravenel curve, and we saw Russ Telker along with Wayne Buttermore run a little bit wide through there. Hopefully for their sakes they didn't pick up a slowdown. However, they were definitely abusing those track limits, so that could be a factor in this race as well. So far so clean heading into the chicane for some of these drivers towards the end of the lap. That's Charlie Vaccaro going for the detour and definitely picking up a slowdown after that off-track excursion. He is going to lose out on multiple positions, a whole lot of positions. In fact, he's going to drop his way all the way down to P number 25. Just got overtaken by Telkler, Wallbald, Bruzarosco, Buttermore, and Kuhn as well. Not ideal for him at the very beginning of this race. Tough stuff for Charlie Vaccaro. Meanwhile, Alice Pleva, he is still leading it over Duda Castro in second, and Jason Green in P number 3. Bobby West still running in fourth with some hard battling a little bit farther in the back. That's Andrew Love, who won in the Spec 2 category last time out at Lime Rock Park. He is currently running in P at number 18. Got a move put on him by Christian Abanco, who's cut his way through the field like a hot knife through butter early on in this race, and now feeling really racy with the 555 car of Brema heading through out of the Mercedes-Benz arena, the AMG arena I should say, heading their way into turn number 6 in just a few moments time. A corner that we haven't really talked about so far in this broadcast, but with a decently heavy braking zone entering that corner, that could be an overtaking opportunity if you're one of these drivers feeling especially brave.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of really good overtaking spots as we see the 902 of Wallbolt off in the gravel, able to rejoin. Didn't like you see any contact with any of the other cars, so nicely done by Gary as we see Telker now makes that move around up into P20. So yeah, there's a couple of spots here that, you know, talked about track limits. It's a little it's not as straightforward as some of the newer tracks. There's like that corner in particular there. You can take a lot of that green on the inside, jump the curb, and carry it. It just really cut that corner very deeply. And there's a couple other corners like that, and then there's a couple corners that will catch you out if you take it too deep. So track knowledge is very important here.
This track is part of a very unique blend of racing circuits. There's not a whole lot of tracks that fall into this category, but it's a 90s circuit. Ooh, as Pleva has a terrible run hang through the chicane and is possibly going to lose the lead due to Castro on the inside, trying to get the move done to take the lead of the race from Pleva, and he gets it done heading into that final corner. Pleva just overshot a teeny tiny bit heading through the Vidal chicane as Jason Perry has gone for a spin in that final turn. He's going to be stopped on the outside as already towed back to the pits. So Jason Perry with a terrible turn of fortune. He is now well out of this fight. The Spec 1 driver has had to tow. Meanwhile, Pleva looking for the move on Duda Castro. Bobby West looking to sneak a wheel down the inside as well. West feeling incredibly racy, nearly 3 wide. Heading into turn number 2, things have all kinds of heated up at the north end of this field. And despite them being spread out a teeny tiny bit in the qualifying session, they are nose to tail in this race right now. And it was nearly coming to head there with Jason Green nearly giving a bump and run to Duda Castro, rounding their way around turn number 3. Thankfully for Jason Green and Duda Castro, they got away fairly clean, but right now Jason Green giving a bump draft to Bobby West, hang their way into turn number 6 and finishing up the point that I was going to make about how these drivers were incredibly close in that qualifying session. Right now the front 8 are separated by about 2 seconds, and we're already about 5.5 minutes into this race. So despite them being spread out a teeny tiny bit in that qualifying session, things are anything but in this race.
Yeah, you can just tell the power of the tow here with these cars. We talk about it week in and week out. And it's doing a good job of just keeping those guys. And when you get those guys up front that are battling and swapping positions going into corners, it just helps everybody stay closer together. So you've got a nice 8-car pack up front. You've got Wood leading this next second group here. We got Jacobson. It's just seeing, look, they're 3 wide. Just fighting for every inch they can get.
This is insane stuff. This is right outside the top 10.
Oh.
You've got Jacobson and a spinner in the back. That's Tom Gradwell around, coming out of turn number 11, and some more drivers shuffling around all throughout this field. This back, that shot, I gotta say, Simuli, that was a beautiful camera angle as they round their way into turn number 11, towards turn number 11 at the time. That was insane, just seeing that pack of Spec Racer Ford cars all so close together. They're still close, heading through the chicane. Christian Kabanka in the midst of that. He's kept that car fairly clean thus far. Started this race a little bit farther towards the back after not setting a qualifying time, but he's cut through the field like a hot knife through butter, and he's still trying to face a challenge of overtaking Paolo Brema, who is not a very easy driver to race with. He's been involved in some incidents in the past, and he is not giving any quarter to Christian Kabanka side by side. Going down that start-finish straightaway at the start of lap number 4. They're still going to be side-by-side, heading their way into the braking zone of turn at number 1. Kabanka, he just wants to get that 555 car out of his way, and thankfully he has done that successfully. So now Christian Kabanka in P number 13, lucky number P13, is going to have to do a little bit harder, a little bit more hard work to move his way up into the top 10. However, it's not too far in front of him, as you've got Cathcart, Justice, and Jacobson all covered by barely any air right towards the tail end of the top 10. Kabanka is close to them as well. Christian feeling incredibly racy. I think it's probably a matter of when, not if, that Christian Kabanka slips his way into the top 10.
Yeah, we've seen him a few times just starting the back and just say, you know what, I'm just going to have some fun today passing cars. And usually does a really good job. Sometimes gets caught out by incident, as we see Josh Wilkie there, our buddy. Looks like he's got some front end damage, and I'm not sure he's how that occurred, but yeah, it looks pretty rough. Obviously, he's losing time. He's kind of dropped off the back. Yeah, he's down 6 seconds back from Terusio, and he was in that group earlier. So I'd be interested to see if we can find a replay of that. Maybe not. As he's just getting overhauled. He's going to have to just try and see if he can get into the pits, get that car repaired, and take his fuel. So hopefully we'll be in a position when he comes by the pit entry on this lap that he can take that and finish the race safely without having to pit again for fuel. As we get a replay here from Samuli, looks like he's already got some damage on the car. So that might be one of those. Oh, here we go. Looks like we got something here. Coming down into turn 1. Get hard on the brakes. Make that move down. Oh, just everybody up front checked up in front of him, and just couldn't get the car stopped in time, and there's where the damage came from.
Yeah, I think it was tough luck, though. I feel like I have to issue out an apology to Josh after saying that he was having such a good meeting. Sadly for him, things have all come to naught. Brad Cathcart, who is running 3rd of the Masters drivers and inside that top 10, has now come into pit lane, so that is a very early stop to come in less than 10 minutes into this 40-minute affair here. So Brad Cathcart trundling his way down pit lane, stopped in his box now. He doesn't overshoot it. He hits his marks beautifully. We'll just have to see how he exits at. Tough luck for Josh as well, because if he gets in some sort of incident, he can't really tow back to the pits, because he was our producer for the Weekend Warriors Formula Ford race earlier on this afternoon, and he ended up spilling some coffee on his keyboard, so I don't think he can hit that escape button to try and tow his way back to the pits if he gets involved in some sort of extracurricular incident after this one that he's already been involved in. Meanwhile, at the north end of the field, Atlas Pleva is still leading, and Dudu Castro in P2. They're actually breaking away a teeny tiny bit from Bobby West. However, that half a second gap is definitely going to diminish between now and the end of this lap. Still, the top 8 separated by about 2.5 seconds. Jesus Rodriguez is the rear gunner. We've got 2 Masters drivers, the front 2 in the Masters category. This is Jörg Mani. We're riding on board with him, hitting the curbs at every single opportunity he can. This is a complete contrast to what we saw in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors earlier on this afternoon. Those cars, if you hit a curb, just hit it the wrong, or even look at the curb the wrong way, you're just gonna end up in the barriers. Here with these Spec Racer Fords, though, these drivers are eating their curbs like a cereal with breakfast. It's absolutely insane. The lines that these drivers are running and hitting every single curb on this lap. Jörg Mani running in P5. He's got a car of Andala right between himself and race for that lead in the Masters category. However, he's got a hard battle right in front of him. Jason Green looking to find a way to get past Bobby West, wasn't close enough, heading down the back straightaway into that Vidal chicane. And you can see the drivers taking that interesting line, running that curb and shooting off of it, going on into the final corner of turn at number 16. So interesting lines being run here in these Spec Racer Fords, but I guess with the nature of these cars, they can get away with it to a certain extent.
Yeah, you have to be very careful when you're running that tabletop curb on the outside there of the chicane. Once you get out of the chicane coming into the final corner, because it can do some floor damage, and so you have to be very careful how you take those. Also in the Schumacher S, there's a chance to take a bit of curb to maximize your line through there. But these cars are still racy up at the front. 1.7 seconds covering the top 8. And then you've got a little 3-second gap back to Wood. And then another 3 seconds back to that group with Justice and Cabanca, Jacobson, and then several other cars. So Cabanca's got almost up to the front of that group. So once he gets clear of that, it's going to be interesting to see how much time he can make up trying to catch back up to that top group.
If Cabanca ends up in this fight inside the top 8, he is going to be probably one of the most entertaining drivers to keep our eyes on come time for the end of this race. Speaking of entertaining, that was absolutely insane hang through the AMG Arena at the beginning of this lap. Due to Castro's retaking the lead from Alex Pleva, Bobby West and Jason Green nearly made it 3 wide with Pleva heading into turn number 3 at the beginning of this lap. Jörg Mani taking it steady. He's like, hey, at this stage of the race, I don't want to end up in an accident. We're just barely over 10 minutes into this race, so trying going 3 wide into turn number 3 is absolutely insane from all of these drivers. And despite them battling hard, they are pulling away from the cars behind. Daniel Wood running effectively in no man's land. He has no cars behind him and no cars in front of him for about 3 seconds either way, 4 seconds actually, between Jesus Rodriguez and Daniel Wood for P8 and P9 respectively. And you may just barely be able to see there you go, you can see Daniel Wood's car just barely in the back of shot coming out of turn number 13. He, as I just said, running in no man's land. You can see he's still running that car quite nicely though, running some strong lap times, remaining in P9. He's not feeling any pressure from cars behind. However, he's not getting that draft either, so I'm curious if he's gonna have to try and pit early just because he's getting no draft assistance at all.
Yeah, because it looks like that group behind him is slowly tracking him down. So it's going to be one of those that he either needs to come into the pits. Reese.
Oh, Reese. Holy hell, that was incredibly close to ending in total disaster. That could have been a round of bowling involving Antonio Reese being the ball. Thankfully for Jörg Mani, he actually lost some time, that being Antonio Reese, who lost a little bit of time but did not lose out on a spot. However, Jörg Mani has slid his way up into P number 4 after putting on a move on Bobby West. But these drivers up towards the north end of the field are feeling even more racy because that's 2 laps in a row where we nearly saw a big accident involving the top 8 heading through the first 4 corners on the lap.
Yeah, really, and that turn 1 is the tricky part of that is it's a downhill entry into the corner, and so these cars will have a tendency to lock up, and if you miss a braking point by even a little bit, you see the results is basically Antonio just kind of slid through the corner. Luckily, was able to get the car pointed in a direction that he wasn't going to hit the car in front, and Rodriguez did a good job of just keeping an eye out and making sure that he didn't cross over Antonio's car as he was getting it collected. And I would give a shout out to Rodriguez. I think he's fairly new to our series, but he got a nice top 5 in the Formula Ford race, and is doing a really good job in this race, hanging on to the end of that lead group.
I recognize Jesus from last season. He didn't run full time though. I think he ran in just occasional races throughout last season, but ever since he joined, he has been a very, I wouldn't say indomitable force, but he has been contending for race wins, and he was involved in that very close 4x4 finish, well, not 4x4, 4-car finish, heading to the checkered flag at the V runoffs at Daytona 2 weeks ago. He was involved in that. I think I actually sneaked in P number 2 or 3. He was a big force to be reckoned with in all the races he's done so far. So Rodriguez running in P8 is very nicely played. He also keeps his car clean. He doesn't get involved in incidents, and usually has just quiet shows, quiet races running up towards the front of the field. So with how hard the battling has been all throughout this race, we could see Rodriguez possibly sneak into a podium or maybe even a win. We'll just have to wait and see how things shake out for the driver of the 76 car. Speaking of things shaking out, things have actually spread out between Jason Green and Bobby West. Those two separated by 1.2 seconds, heading their way through the AMG arena at the beginning of this 8th lap of the race. So maybe Bobby West possibly, I'm trying to see if there's any sort of damage on that Spec Racer Ford race car, because this has not been a good turn of pace at all for the driver of the 89 car.
No, it's just there's a little bit of a gap there now. It was 1 second between Green and West, and West is still pulling those other 4 cars along for the ride. But it only takes Castro and Pleva to go side by side into one of the corners, and the next thing you know, there's back to an 8-car pack again. Still got plenty of time on the clock. Just clicked over to 17 minutes in, 23 to go. So still plenty of racing left to do. And I don't think that we've seen the last pass for position before this race is done.
Oh, certainly not. This is going to be, it's going to turn into an absolute hornet's nest and a total dogfight with these drivers running at the north end of the field. And we could see it heat up very, very soon. Castro and Pleva, those have been the 2 drivers to lead this race so far. However, we could see Jason Green get in the midst of that as well, running in P3, not too far off of Pleva and Castro at all. We could see these drivers maybe go 3 wide. I mean, Pleva and Green were doing it with Bobby West not very long ago. They could try and add Castro to that fight. Right now, it's Castro leading them, heading into the Vidal chicane at the end of lap number 8. We're coming up to the halfway mark in the not-too-distant future. It's actually about 2 minutes left until we hit that halfway mark, so only 1 lap until we get there. And right now, we're seeing battling all throughout the field. This is Paolo Brema in that 555 car, getting a fantastic view of a dogfight between Jacobson and Justice. They were nearly side-by-side heading through that Vidal chicane, and now you can see Jacobson coming in. So an interesting call to come down pit lane. We saw this from, I believe it was Gradwell earlier on, and that's Russell Telker going off the track with a big impact into the outside wall, right into the Vidal chicane. We're going to take a look at a replay to see what happened to the driver of the 260 car.
Yep, just coming down out of the corner,
punt.
Run down to, it's just a miscommunication on the braking point. Vaccaro into the back of Telker, and Telker into the Armco barrier. I was also going to say that I see Josh Wilkie also look like he's towed as well. So he's back in the pits, and that may be day done for Josh, unfortunately. You've jinxed him again, Ron.
I am going to have to write out a whole multi-paragraph apology. I thought once I graduated high school, it was going to be the end of me writing multi-paragraph essays. I'm going to have to write out a whole lot of apologies to Josh before we do our next broadcast together, which I think is going to be this upcoming... Actually, no, I say that it's not going to be this upcoming Sunday. It's going to be tonight with the Radical Americas Championship, so I'm going to have to be titter-tattering on my keyboard a whole lot between now and that broadcast starting up in less than 4 hours time. Hard battling all throughout the field. This is Wilson Brazarosco getting a move done on the 412 car down into the Goodyear hairpin. Nicely played from the Brazilian to move up into P number 14. And Tom Gradwell, who was one of those first drivers to come down pit lane, he's running in P16, currently 35 seconds back of our race leader, Dudu Castro. And I'm curious how things are going to shake out with that strategy call that he made earlier on. Actually, was it Gradwell that actually came in? I'm trying to recollect my memory, was it Gradwell? I mean, we see Jacobson. He came into the pits the last time, but I think it may have been Brad Cathcart actually that came into the pits. Tom Gradwell was involved in a spin. So it was two master drivers, both Australians in the field, being involved in some incidents. Brad Cathcart, not really an incident, just coming down pit lane. A very early stop as well, coming in like it was less than 10 minutes, and I think it was 9 minutes and 28 seconds into the race, to be very, very specific and probably very, very incorrect. But Brad Cathcart running in 20th, and now we have another pitter, this being Josh Justice.
Yep, Justice into the pits. He was in that group that included Kabanka and Bremet and Love. So he is now into the pits for his service, right at just a little past the halfway point. So he'll come in and make a stop, get his fuel, and head back out. It's almost like the car was going up on Jackson. I don't think that would happen. No, very quick stop, just under 10 seconds for Justice. So back out on track, back out in P18, and he'll have a couple of cars in front of him, so he can have a target to try to fixate on and run some good hot laps.
And he also got the jump on Jeff Jacobson. Those two, if you recall correctly, were battling very, very hard when Jeff Jacobson came in for that somewhat early pit stop. Justice has been able to leapfrog in front of him, so maybe the overcut could be the strategy of choice this afternoon. Of course, there's a whole lot that could decide whether or not an overcut works, one of them mainly being traffic. And usually in these spec racer Fords, the pit stops play a huge role in deciding who's going to win. Maybe at a track like this, though, being caught in a pack is going to actually help you rather than hurt you. Getting that slipstream benefit down the two long straightaways and flat-out blasts on this circuit could be key in deciding who's actually going to win. We could see some of these drivers at the north end of the field come in. They're battling for the lead. It's not for the win just yet. We still have 18 minutes left to go until that checkered flag is going to come out. But Duda Castro, I think at this point, has led more laps than Alice Pleva did. But these two have absolutely dominated this race, and they nearly came to blows heading through the Vidal chicane. That was a matter of inches separating those two drivers coming in to that heavy braking zone towards the end of this lap. But Castro battling hard, racing as hard as he can to try and fend off any sort of challenge from Alice Pleva. Jason Green, meanwhile, he has been very, very patient, and this goes back to a point that we always mention in reference to Jason Green. He does some fuel-saving strategy, so maybe that could be the reason why he's not forcing the issue on Pleva or Castro.
I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's in the spot he wants to be in. He's kind of drafting behind a couple other cars, and he's maximizing his fuel usage. So he's going to try and make that. He's going to try and make that pass on pits as opposed to on track, and see if it pays off for him. If he can save himself a second. Castro, however, does a really good job about getting his fuel number right. More often than not, he has missed a couple of times where he was leading and just ends up running out of fuel at on the very last lap. But for the most part, does a really good job. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to guess those two cars will be the two quickest on pit road. So it's going to be really Pleva's job to just try and make the most of what he can in the pits.
So this race has really changed from what we saw in the first really 15 minutes. It was the front eight separated by about 2.5 seconds. Now it's actually spread out a decent amount. Antonio Reese is the last car of this, well, you can still kind of call it a train. The top seven separated by about 3.8 seconds coming through the Michael Schumacher S on this 11th lap of the race. However, that gap between Green and West is still pretty decent. I mean, that's 1.4 seconds now separating those two drivers. I don't think it's been a steady grow, however. I think it was just one big spike up in terms of that gap growing, and ever since then, it stayed roughly the same. But currently, the top seven separated by 3.6 seconds. Jesus Rodriguez has really lost touch with this pack, so as we were saying that he's a driver who keeps it very clean and is running up towards the front. He's lost touch entirely with Antonio Reese, has lost the draft, and may fall into the crutches of Daniel Wood in the not too distant future. Yeah, you can see Jesus Rodriguez heading his way out down through this quick little flat out blast before the Hyundai curve of turn number 16. Duda Castro coming into the pits from the lead of the race, 25 minutes in exactly. So Duda Castro coming in. This is a little bit surprising, so maybe this could be a very short stop if he has fuel saved in the first half of that race. Spent a decent amount of time in the lead. However, when he wasn't in the lead, he was running in P2 and enjoying that draft quite nicely. So maybe Dudu Castro going to spend not a whole lot of time in the box. We'll just have to wait and see how quick this is.
Yep, 9.7 stopped, 32.3 total from cone to cone. So very quick stop for Castro, about the same time as what Josh Justice did, at least 2 seconds faster than pretty much everybody else. So that's about what we're going to see for Green and Pleva as well. So it's going to be up to these that second group to try and run some hot laps, and it's going to be up to Castro to try and just track some cars down he can get a tow off of and maybe just maximize his lap times. I figure most of the cars will be in within the next 2 or 3 laps. I can't see him getting much past the 31, 32-minute mark.
For Castro's sake, though, I don't think this has worked out too well, at least in terms of how he's exited the pits, because he's right behind Paulo Brema, who is running in the top 10 on top of the Spec 2 drivers right now. But as we said earlier on, he is a very hard racer, and regardless of what sort of position he's running in, he is going to fight like hell to stay on to that spot. So maybe Dudu Castro being behind Paulo Brema may be a curse rather than a blessing. However, Pleva and Green, they're still out on track, along with a whole lot of other drivers running inside that top 10. In fact, all the drivers running inside the top 10 have yet to come in to the pits. However, we could see Pleva or Green maybe respond to Castro's call. Let's see, of the two, it would probably be Pleva coming in first. Jason Green usually stays out a teeny tiny bit more, and Pleva, I think, had a terror. There we go, Pleva coming in pit lane. So right as I was saying, he would be the first one of the two to come in the pits. Alice Pleva comes in for his one and only stop, 27 minutes into this race, exactly 1 lap after Castro came in. Bobby West has come in as well. So we're going to see how things shake out with themselves and Dudu Castro. This, I think, is going to be very, very tight. Jorg Monti has now inherited P2 with Antonio Reese right behind him in P3. Dudu Castro rounding his way around the final corner, and Paulo Brema coming into the pits as well. So I don't think Dudu Castro got held up too much and actually enjoyed the draft. So how is it going to shake out? Pleva and Bobby West out and away. I think West gained a whole lot of time in that pit cycle, but look, Dudu Castro blowing their doors off. It worked to absolute perfection for Dudu Castro, as it looks like he's exited out with probably about a 1.5 second lead over Alice Pleva. That worked like a charm.
It did exactly the way you would draw it up. He did a great job, got the undercut, got his pit done, was able to get that draft off of Brema. But yeah, Bobby West did a great job. Very, very quick stop. So far, the fastest 9.4 was about on pace with Castro as far as the actual full pit lane time. But it was about 1 second faster than Pleva, so he's managed to get that gap tightened up. And so now he can be chasing on Pleva, and they're going to both be chasing on Castro as we wait for the rest of the cars to come into the pits.
Bobby West actually gained a whole lot of time with that pit cycle. I'm curious what kind of times they have down pit lane. I'm curious what these two are going to pull as well. Are Monti and Reese going to come in together? When is Jason Green going to pit? We don't have a whole lot of time left to go in this race. Coming up on only 11 minutes left on the clock, so Jason Green, he has to come in at some point. By the rules, he has to pit eventually. It's just a matter of when, not if. Jason Green, he always stretches that fuel out a little bit more, so I'm not too confident that he's going to pit this time by. We'll just see if he actually makes that decision to come down pit lane and makes myself out to be a fool. And you can see the bump drafting between Monti and Reese. And Monti has come in independent of Reese, who has stayed out. So the two master drivers running at the very north end of the field with some split strategies, and Reese running a little bit wide on corner exit, nearly touching the grass. But Monti has come into the pits from the second position. It's just a matter of time to see when we're going to see Green, Reese, and Adalo come in. Daniel Wood has pitted as well, so I'm curious how things are going to work out between himself, Jesus Rodriguez running now in P number 4, and also Christian Kabanka. It was a decent gap that Kabanka had to Daniel Wood. He couldn't really close it up at all, and you can see he's running in no man's land. You can actually see Dudu Castro and Alice Pleva in the back of shot, heading his way into turn number 1 right now. Jurg Mani on pit exit. He is going to be behind the likes of Castro, Pleva, West, and I think maybe Green will be able to come out behind all of them, but Jurg Mani coming out in what would probably be net P4 based off how things have shaken out and how the overcut strategy, we thought the overcut was going to be the strategy of choice, but it hasn't really worked out too well for Mani.
It hasn't. No, he has losing a lot of time, and a lot of it's got to do with the fact that he was in the pits for 2 seconds, or stopped 2 seconds longer than the rest of the guys up front. It was a second longer, half second longer than Pleva. 2 seconds longer than Castro and West. So Monty's usually one of those that doesn't gamble on fuel. He runs the car hard, 100% for the entire race. Doesn't do a lot of fuel saving, and is usually, like I said, pretty safe on fuel. So he's got probably an extra lap of fuel in the car. So if the race shakes out that runs a little bit longer than some, it may be to his advantage. So we'll see what happens as I feel like we'll get the rest of these guys in probably this lap, if I have my guess.
Ooh, I'm still not confident that Jason Green is going to pit. However, I think the chances are much higher that he comes down pit road this time by. And yeah, you can see he's swooping down to the inside. Jason Green pitting from the lead along with Antonio Reese behind. And Dallo looks like he's going to stay out for yet another lap unless he made a very abrupt cut. No, he is staying out yet again. So Flavio and Dallo, who started this race up towards the front of the field and was involved in that battle. We haven't really talked about him too much though. In that 145 car, he has taken the lead with about 8 minutes left on the clock. However, he will have to pit eventually, just enjoying that clean air. Now I'm curious to see how Green is going to exit out compared to the likes of Castro, Pleva, West, and Monty. I'm curious how Reese is going to exit out in reference to that battle for the lead and win in the Masters category. You can see Green coming out well ahead of his adversaries. It's going to be close between himself and Dudu Castro heading into turn number 1, but Jason Green looks like he's going to jump into the lead. However, he is going to be on those slightly cooler tires. Dudu Castro, he's in the groove, he's in the zone, and he's going to be pushing like hell to try and defend off and get a move done on Jason Green. Dudu Castro, meanwhile, he doesn't have Alice Pleva to worry about. The gap between those two is about 2 seconds. So at this point, it's looking like it's going to be a Jason Green and Dudu Castro battle for the win in today's Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race. Meanwhile, Reese exited out just alongside Jurg Mani. Those two separated by about 0.7 of a second towards the beginning of this 15th lap of the race. But this is going to be where my attention is lying. Dudu Castro right behind Jason Green, and Dallo will probably pit at the end of this lap. He needs to come in at some point, so we're going to see him come in and then relinquish the lead to Green and Castro. I must say I'm interested to see how this is going to work out for Dallo, because he's currently 17 and a half seconds. Oh, as Jesus Rodriguez has gone off. That's a very big off-track excursion heading around the Goodyear hairpin, and he's going to be stopped and possibly towing back. Disaster for Jesus Rodriguez.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what happened there and what would cause him to tow back. So now it's going to be up to Castro. He's got to be very careful because obviously I think he's probably got his pace is very similar to Green and probably one of our top drivers week in and week out. But he's got to be very careful where he makes a pass, because if they stay side by side for too long, that's going to bring the likes of Pleva and West and Monty back into this fight, as we see Andallo finally coming in. Great run by him to just extend that gap out and extend his fuel out for an extra lap. So it should be a very quick stop for him, and that might bode well for his chances.
And I think that call for Flavio Andallo is actually going to help him get P8 in this race. It's going to be very close between himself and Daniel Wood, but I think he may be able to win out. Meanwhile, Duda Castro and Jason Green side by side, heading into the braking zone of turn number 1, and Castro gets the move done. Nice textbook stuff from Duda Castro to take the lead of this race. We're coming up to only 5 minutes left to go, and in terms of lap count, it's barely any time at all. So we're running out of overtaking opportunities. If you are Jason Green, I think at this stage, though, if you're Jason Green, you may not want to force the issue too much, because Alice Pleva is closing. It was about 2 seconds between themselves and Duda Castro not very long ago. That's now gone down to 1.6. So if they start battling very hard, this will definitely become a 3-horse race.
Yeah, absolutely. So Green's going to be looking for an opportunity to do that same slipstream move that Castro made earlier. If looking like when we get back to the line, maybe 2 laps. So my guess is he'll wait to the last lap to try and make any kind of moves unless Castro makes a mistake.
I mean, we could see, I mean, we've definitely seen stranger things here in this series. Sorry to budge in there, Charles, but a mistake from Duda Castro would definitely not be out of the picture. Castro usually very clean. He doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. However, we've seen stranger things in this series. There's a very good reason why some highlights from these broadcasts have ended up in the Apex Racing TV highlight reel. The strange things that can happen here in the Weekend Warriors series, but whenever strange things don't happen, we just have some hard-fought racing like we have right now. Alice Pleva ran very, very wide coming out of turn number 11. However, he didn't pick up the slowdown, and now that gap is only about a second. So Pleva, sooner rather than later, he's going to be in the drift to these two. So maybe with Pleva closing in, this could force Jason Green's hand and make him try and go for something very, very risky, incredibly close. Heading through the chicane, hard curb wax for all of these drivers. They avoid a slowdown for now. A slowdown through the hairpin would be an absolute disaster for all of these drivers, so they're going to try and avoid that. But despite that, they still need to get every single 10th out of their race cars that they possibly can, with only about 3 minutes left to go in this race. I believe this will be 2 to go if I'm very much mistaken. And now Jason Green, he's forcing the issue down the inside of Duda Castro side by side, heading into turn number 1. Green is going to be cooking it a lot into the corner. Pleva also getting really, really racy with Castro behind as well. They're side by side heading into turn 2. They single file out, but Jason Green with a beautiful move down the inside into turn number 1 to take the lead of the race. For now, we still have about 3 minutes left to go on the clock and some decent overtaking opportunities if you're Duda Castro or if you're Alice Pleva. Jason Green at this point, he needs to drive the widest Spec Racer Ford race car that has ever been seen on planet Earth.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Pleva gained about 0.3 of a second going on that straight down into the chicane before the end of the lap. And then I think Green saw how much ground he was making up, said, I can't wait. I've got to try and make the move now and try and get Castro between me and Pleva. That's the only way I'm going to be able to run. Otherwise, Pleva's just going to swamp me, and then he's going to go just try and check out. So it was a smart call on Pleva's part to just try and get it tightened up, and then as well as Green's part to just say, I've got to make the move now and take my chances.
There is a big sense of urgency for all of these drivers. And I think if you're Alice Pleva, you could be eyeing up a move in the not too distant future. Duda Castro nearly eyeing up a move heading into turn number 11. That would have been a beautiful move if he tried to make it stick. Now he's going down the inside into turn number 12, nearly making contact are those two on corner exit. Oh my God, that was definitely contact between Pleva and Green. He is going to be slowing down. Pleva giving the bump draft to Duda Castro. Very, very close. They're making contact. The being and banging sides. Heading through turn number 13. We're coming to take the white flag this time by, and not a single quarter is being given by any of these drivers, battling for the podium positions and battling for the win in only the second race of the season. Green looking to go back-to-back to kick this season off. Duda Castro looking to pick up his first win in this series in pretty much about 12 races. The last one he got was towards the end, or towards the beginning of season number 2. So we're gonna see what these drivers try and do. Alice Pleva and Duda Castro are going to be battling hard. Jason Green now trying to get in the midst of that. Who is going to prevail in this fight? We have 1 lap to go at the Nürburgring. Pleva trying to get a move done on Jason Green to get his way into P number 2. Jason Green, I think at this stage, he may be seeing the bigger picture. He's like, hey, I got the victory last time out at Lime Rock Park. I'm running P3 right now. I don't need to risk it for the biscuit to go back to back. As cool as that would be, I much more value the championship. So that could be the reason why Green is actually dropping back a teeny tiny bit. Now it looks like a dogfight between Pleva and Castro. Those two separated by barely any air, going through this flat out section, the middle section of the circuit, heading into turn number 6 right now. Castro running a little bit wide on corner exit, it must be said, giving himself a shallow approach through turn number 7. Not a very good exit. Pleva, he's going to have a run. You can see that gap closing now, about a quarter of a second between these two, about to enter the Goodyear hairpin for the final time, and Pleva not close enough to get a move done, heading into that tightest bend on the entire circuit at the end of this race. But Duda Castro, he's going to be feeling the burn. He's going to be feeling a whole lot of pressure, and any sort of mistake will ruin these drivers' chances of winning here this afternoon. But Castro may have a saving grace. Jason Green is closing into the back of Alice Pleva. He may try and go for a move heading into turn number 11 and 12. No, not close enough to get a move done to slot his way into P number 2. However, oh my god, that was a very good exit. Pleva not taking any chances at all. Very close to picking up a slowdown on the exits of these corners. Castro cutting to the inside line, weaving, trying to break that slipstream in any way he can, but I think it's a fruitless effort. As you can see, Pleva is closing. They're going to be side by side, coming into the braking zone, into the Vidal chicane for the final time. They're beating and banging and roughing each other up. Castro is still going to be leading at Pleva in P2, and this is going to be close between these drivers coming to the checkered flag. Castro, even on the small little flat out blast between turns 15 and 16, doing everything in his power to break that draft. They have a decently long run until they get to that checkered flag. However, it's going to be Dudu Castro winning it just barely over Alice Pleva in P2, and Jason Green, with a valiant effort, ends up in 3rd. Wow, that was a dogfight.
It was indeed. That was a great battle between those 3 drivers on the last 3 or 4 laps of the race. And yeah, I think Green kind of laid back, saying, let me see what's going to happen between these 2 guys. And they tried. They did their best to race hard and not wreck each other, and they were able to accomplish that, but it was sketchy there for a little bit. But great job by all 3 of those guys. It was a great finish.
A fantastic finish indeed, and we're following Andrew Love, who's going to end up the top driver in the Spec 2 category, and Antonio Reese ends up being the top of the Masters. The gap between himself and Jurg Mani ballooned towards the end of this race, with about 3 seconds separating them coming to the checkered flag. So not sure exactly what happened to Jurg Mani. Not ideal towards the end of this race. Andrew Love, all credit to him though. We didn't really talk about him too much throughout this race, and in a very action-packed fight up towards the front. Didn't really mention the Spec 2 fight, which was very up and down. It looked like it was going to be Paolo Bremi's race to lose, along with Josh Wilkie, our buddy Josh Wilkie. It looked like he was going to be the surefire one victorious in the Spec 2 class. But in the end, it ends up being Andrew Love going for the double. And ooh, Russ Telker running very wide around the final corner. Not ideal race for him at all. Thankfully, he got his car repaired and is going to end up in 21st. But Andrew Love, I don't think we talked about him at all throughout this broadcast here this afternoon, ends up the top driver in Spec 2 in 13th overall. Very nicely played from the driver of the 544 car.
Yeah, absolutely. Great job by Andrew to get the win in the class. And yeah, very, very quiet race, but sometimes those are the ones that you do the best in, where you're just kind of hanging out and letting other people make mistakes. And it seems like that's what happened in Andrew's case, and was able to get that class victory.
So I think we're waiting for a few more cars to take the checkered flag from this action-packed Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race, round number 2 of the season. Hey, we've had so much action so far. We're only 2 races in. We are, I'm trying to do the math in my head, ew, my God, my voice is already giving out. That's not ideal considering we have a 2-hour broadcast later on this evening. We are a 6th of the way through the season, and we've already had a bucket full of action. Lime Rock last time out, we had 2 photo finishes for both the win and the final podium spot, and here an absolute dogfight between the podium runners towards the end of this race. Incredible stuff, and we've got some great races to look forward to all throughout this season. Letting on next time out on June the 30th, running on the Grand Prix Loud of Monza. A week after that, Oschersleben on the 14th, Mid-Ohio on the 21st, Daytona going back to the track we ran the V runoffs at on the 28th of July, Okayama, Zandvoort, Nürburgring, we're coming back here on the combined layout on August the 18th, Navarra on the 24th of August, and then to round the season off, we are going to be going to Alton Park. Whole lot of stuff to look forward to, but here are the results from this action-packed race. In Germany at the Nürburgring Grand Prix layout, Dudu Castro ends up taking the checkered flag, the top driver with top honors. Fantastic stuff. Himself and Alice Pleva, they're the drivers battling for the lead all throughout this race. They're exchanging the lead earlier on. They started this race on the front row, and they end up in the reverse order as they did at the very beginning. Castro wins it, Pleva in P2, and Jason Green, with a very valiant effort, ends up in third. That's going to be Bobby West, the sponsor of this broadcast. He ends up in fourth. Definitely made his appearance on this show a lot, though, as he was part of that massive pack towards the beginning of this race. And it's Antonio Reis in P5 overall, the top of the Masters. Very nicely played for the Portuguese driver. Jorg Mani is going to end up this race in sixth, a little bit farther back compared to Antonio Reis. Flavio Andallo, who is one of the last drivers to come down pit lane, ends up in seventh. So very nicely played from the Brazilian driver to finish ahead of Daniel Wood in P8. Christian Cabanco, who I think was our hard charger by a country mile, ends this race in P number 9, 16 spots from where he started this race. And then Josh Justice is going to round out your top 10.
Yep, Brad Cathcart gets the final spot on the Masters podium to finish at P11. Andrew Love gets your Spec 2 class win, finishes 12th overall. Paulo Brema second in Spec 2. 13th overall, Charlie Vaccaro just missing out on the podium in Masters, 14th. Tom Gradwell in 15th. Ignacio Terusio gets the third and final podium position in Spec 2. And 16th, Wilson Bruzarosco just missed out in 17th. Jeff Jacobson in 18th. Gary Wolbolt 19th. Darren Keene in 20th. Russ Telker in 21st. Wayne Buttermore 22nd. Jesus Rodriguez had a really great run until the very end of the race. Finishes a very disappointed. I'm sure he'll be disappointed with a 23rd. Josh Wilkie, our buddy, finished in 24th. Jason Perry in 25th. Adam Bradshaw and Bob Kern never took the start, so they'll finish in 26th and 27th. And that is your complete race result.
Alrighty, so I think we have some drivers waiting in the interview waiting area, and the first driver I want to have a chat with is our winner overall, that being Dudu Castro. Dudu, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. That was action-packed from our perspective, so I can imagine from your perspective behind the wheel was absolutely insane. Talk us through the end of this race.
Well, it's a really tough race, a lot of draft. I did a really good pit with the exactly right amount of fuel. But three laps later, I made a mistake on a turn before the Schumacher's asses, and I lost like a second. So that's why Jason could leave the pit in front of myself. Jason had a good. His car was he had a really good set because he had a better turnout than myself. He had more grip than I had on ending the turn. So I decided to do the move as soon as possible and try to defend as much as I could. Then I realized that I need to save a little bit of fuel. Then he passed me. I did that for one lap. And then I said, no, I'm going to pass right now. And, the door is locked, and that's what I'm going to do. And then that's what happened. For lucky, Alice came together. They spent a little time fighting together. So I just had to fight on the last chicane. So it was a really good race.
Well, it was incredibly hard fought. You definitely had to earn it here this afternoon. And you mentioned you're battling hard with Alice Pleva throughout this race, along with Jason Green. So this may be a little bit of a loaded question, but I kind of want to ask you, how was it like battling with those two? What kind of the strengths could you notice? What kind of weaknesses did they have? And what do you think was of the two? Which one do you prefer battling with?
Be honest, nothing against anyone, both of two, but I think Jason had more pace than Alice. I don't know what happened with his quali. He was doing really good on the officials. When he left the pit, I was pushing hard to get close to him. And I think would be tougher to pass Jason than would be against Alice. But both are great drivers. Both won this races here already. So it's all tough, especially in a track like this with a lot of draft, a lot of points that we can, do any trick. So that's what happened.
I'll tell you what, for your sake, to have a bit more of a calm Sunday in 1 week's time, you're probably hoping that's a bit more calm at Lebanon in 1 week's time. So how do you think that race is going to be at that French track that not a whole lot of people have experience with?
I've never been there. I never drove there. I saw a video 2 days ago from a guy driving there. It's tough, man. It's like up and down, a lot of blind turns. It's not a easy one. For sure, it's a track that I'll need to spend more hours than usual.
Alrighty, well, hopefully we see you on track in 1 week's time, Dudu Castro. Thank you for joining us in the commentary booth.
Yeah,
is there
welcome.
anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Oh, to my family and friends that are watching the race right now, and all the guys that race together here. Great community.
Amen. Well, Dudu, thank you for joining us in the commentary booth. Congratulations on the win, and hope to see you next time out at Lebanon.
Thank you.
That was Dudu Castro, our winner from this afternoon's Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race. And Charles, would you like to have a chat with our Masters driver, Antonio Race?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get Antonio in here. And Antonio,
Very nice.
Congratulations
night.
on your class win.
Thank you.
And P5 overall, so pretty good race. It was a nice 8-card pack up there for the first half, and then you guys got broke up there toward the pit stop time.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened on the pit stop. I was surprised and confused. But other than that, was nice race. And then Manny actually get not enough fuel, so he have to lift in safe fuel on the last lap. That's why I pass Manny. Otherwise, Manny would win. Yeah. On the Masters, I mean.
Yeah, understand. So we were just talking with Castro just a minute ago about next week at Lebanon. Have you had a chance to drive that track yet?
No. I have no clue how to drive on that track. I have no practice. I have a little practice actually. I'm not completely on zeros, but it's kind of hard for me. Anyway, I will be there.
There we go.
I will have fun with the guys. Yeah, that's all that matters.
I think that's the most important thing, right? It's just everybody out having a good time and racing.
Yeah,
You're right. Is there anybody you want to thank before we let you go?
Yeah, Steve Ray, always Steve Ray, and the sponsor of today broadcast was Peter. And you guys for broadcasting, you are the most ideal broadcasters I ever have. And I will always watch every time I go now dinner and watch the race. And for the drivers and for the viewers and for everyone, basically. Okay, guys, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Antonio. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, guys. Have fun, have a good time, and have a good week.
And that was Antonio Reese, our Masters winner it was both races that he won this afternoon in the Formula Fords and the Spec Racer Fords in the Masters. Actually, no, it was Mani winning in the Formula Fords. So those two taking out the lion's share of the victories in the Masters category. And we have one more driver that we're going to have a chat with, that being the sponsor of today's broadcast, Bobby West. And Bobby, thank you for joining us here on Apex Racing TV, and thank you for sponsoring this broadcast as well. It was a very hard-fought fight for you this afternoon, and you end up in P4. So talk us through that very hard-fought race this afternoon.
Yeah, it didn't quite go to plan. I lost the draft about halfway through the race, so I was trying like hell to try and catch up with Alish and Jason again, just to stay in there. And I short fueled, trying to think I'll bridge the gap, and then save fuel behind Alish, because I was not going to get to the end. And then in doing so, I messed up the chicane, and I lost that too. So I was lucky to hold on to fourth at the end there. Antonio was closing quick.
Well, still a very hard-fought day, I'm sure, from your perspective. There was a whole lot of stuff that you could probably screenshot and share onto your social media pages. So, considering you are the sponsor, I'll let you get the plugs and everything. We talked about you a little bit earlier on, but I want you to I want the viewers to hear it straight from your mouth, talking about all your social media pages and why you decided to sponsor this week.
Well, I sponsored it because, I mean, I've been doing this for so many years. It is quite a big part of my life now. It's every Sunday, this is what occupies my time. But I just donated to the league and I use my Instagram to promote or just record my sim racing activities. Because I remembered how you do just like a race against the computer or something, an AI race, and sometimes they're like quite memorable, and you think actually you never think about that again, you never record it. So that's what started the Instagram page. So yeah, if you're on Instagram, follow me. I'll appreciate that, and enjoy sharing the pictures and what we get up to every Sunday here, along with everything else. So that's why that exists.
You've also got the YouTube channel as well, and I'll tell you what, at 558 followers, that's much more of a following than I'll probably ever get on Instagram. So, pretty nice following that you've got there on the app. That, well, I should clarify at this stage, is not officially sponsored or affiliated with Apex Racing TV, because we have kind of a seek and destroy policy when it comes to brand names. But Bobby, thank you for joining us in the commentary booth. Late It On is going to be pretty intense in 1 week's time. What do you fancy that race is going to be like?
That track is very difficult to learn, the Lebanon circuit. So, having only done one Formula Ford race there, every corner is over a blind crest. I don't know what they were thinking when they designed that. So, it could be entertaining. A free track now, so hopefully we'll see a boost in the grid again. And good luck to everyone.
I think, fingers crossed, from our perspective, it's going to be entertaining. I'm sure from your perspective as a driver, it's not going to be a very comfortable 40 minutes coming up in 1 week's time, but we hope to see you back out on track there. Bobby, thank you for joining us. Thank you very much again for sponsoring this broadcast, and hope to see you in 1 week's time at Late and On.
Cheers. Bye, everybody.
That was Bobby West, the sponsor of this broadcast. Now, Late and On, as the driver said, Charles, that's going to be a complete unknown quantity. So, would you like to share in the unknown quantity as well? Because I certainly don't know my way around that track.
Yep, have no idea. So it'll be a little homework for myself also this week, just to try and get a good view of the track, and maybe jump in and maybe run a few laps, or at least, if nothing else, spectate one of the official races and see how it all works out. And we'll be ready to go come next Sunday.
I've done a little bit of driving around that circuit, and let me tell you, driving around that track, regardless of what kind of car it is, I am slower than pouring a jar of molasses out in Antarctica in the middle of winter. I am very, very slow around that track. I cannot make heads or tails of it. Pretty much every single corner is blind, so trying to learn that circuit is going to be a tough challenge for all of these drivers and us here in the broadcast booth. And I think, speaking of this broadcast, that will just about do it. So, for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, Simile Kumo doing a wonderful job working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, and Bobby West, the sponsor of this broadcast, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all again when Super Sunday returns in 1 week's time.